Well, hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Welcome and lovely to see both of you. So let's take a look at the front pages then, shall we? Starting with the Metro. As ceasefire talks continue, the Metro calls the Russian bombing of a Ukrainian hospital Putin's brutal peace offering. The Express makes an impassioned plea to the US president. Mr. Trump, wake up. Ukrainians are the victims. Ahead of the spring statement on Wednesday, the Eye understands there are fears among Labour MPs that the government could abandon the pensions triple lock. The Financial Times hears that Donald Trump is threatening to impose 25% import tariffs on any country that buys Venezuelan oil. The Telegraph speaks to plumbing impresario Charlie Mullins, who claims the Honours Committee threatened to strip him of his OBE unless he attended diversity training after criticising London Mayor Sir Sadiq Khan on social media. In The Guardian, a warning from police that more domestic abusers are driving victims to suicide. The Daily Mail has this headline: Labour to block bid to ban solar panels made by slaves. And The Star shares the very important news that the TV gardener Alan Titchmarsh doesn't like the flowers used in the detective show Grantchester. Well, Steve and Salma are here. That's quite a mixed bag of front pages, to be fair, is it not? But let's head to a story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Steve, which is an accidental leaking of what should have been extremely secure American intelligence.
Yeah, and in a way, this represents the mixed bag tonight. We're in a huge week, internationally and domestically. But as you say, the front pages are all over the place. And this story represents it, really. On one level, this story is hilarious, but deadly serious, because Trump's top kind of cabinet team were on a WhatsApp exchange. And they were revealing their views on Europe and all kinds of things, which we can come to. But either accidentally or perhaps one of them deliberately. Anyway, one way or another, it ended up, this WhatsApp group, the name of the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic was added to it, one of the biggest critics of this administration. And that's the hilarious side, because he must have been sitting there on his phone.
I mean,
and
this
suddenly,
is some of it, actually, isn't it?
And now that, so, you know, he received all this, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, and it's the defence secretary, it's Vance. And in terms of the content, it kind of confirms what we know. But to seeing it so casually expressed behind the scenes, you know, J.D. Vance, one of the WhatsApp, I just hate bailing Europe out again. There's a lot of anti-Europe stuff there. Now, we know they don't like Europe. We know Trump doesn't like Europe. But what vivid confirmation that the old kind of relationship between the United States and Europe is dying in front of our WhatsApp eyes. Yeah. And anyway, this all ended up with the editor of The Atlantic. I mean, talk about the thick of it, you know.
And it's called Houthi PC Small Group. I mean, this is a small group, right? Yeah. That was the point. But you're right. I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. Talks about POTUS, you know, his directive to reopen shipping lanes, which is why they've started re-bombing Houthi targets again. You know, it's all really fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, but it is also ridiculous. I mean, this is quite, as Steve says, revealing. So Houthi PC Small Group sort of suggests that there might have been a bigger group, and this is the side chat that they're having on this.
This is the secure group.
This is the secure group with the small group of people that have accidentally sort of brought in a very critical journalist into their secret negotiations. So ridiculous, of course. But the point of government by WhatsApp and, you know, that social media interaction as well, I think, is a very serious one. Does this seem like a sensible discussion where all the facts are being presented in order to decide, you know, what the action is going to be? Even the sort of ridiculousness of Pete Hegseth saying, you know, I share your loathing, but we are the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else is even close. I mean, is this actually anything that's based on fact? Is this about taking strategic account of US strategic interest? You know, it doesn't feel like this is a conversation that is serious. And also, the US government was asked to confirm whether this was real or not. And in the Telegraph, it says it was a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. I thought somebody must be having a laugh in the press department, who's had to respond on this behalf, because this is not serious. Look at these emojis. What kind of person sends those emojis when you're thinking about taking strategic
That's actually the National Security Advisor, to be honest with you. There we are.
Ridiculous.
It's both funny and alarming.
Yeah.
It's barroom banter elevated from this quote, as Salma was saying, into deep, thoughtful policy coordination. Well, I dread to think it when they're being light-hearted, if this is deep,
good job,
thoughtful.
Pete and your team, etc., etc. Yes, and Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist from The Atlantic that you mentioned, said he was added to the group chat 2 days after receiving a connection request from Mr Waltz on Signal. Mr Waltz with the punch emoji and the flag and the fire, etc. All really interesting. But what you're expressing here is a slight concern about the tiny group who's making some really significant decisions in the Trump cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. But also the mechanism for making that decision, you cannot, over an app, tapping away at your phone, suddenly decide these things. It's got to be discursive. It's got to be with everybody focused with the same facts in front of them. And I think that, this sort of social media increase in the way that government and people in government communicate with each other is actually to the detriment of good decision-making. And let's not forget that the way messages like this hit your brain and give you a dopamine hit sort of demands that you go back almost in an addictive fashion to try and come back and say these things. That is not a good way for the human brain to process some of these decisions.
Hillary Clinton has retweeted the Atlantic article, "You have got to be kidding me." She, of course, was accused of using private email servers, wasn't she? So, all really interesting, and we'll see what comes out of that. In the meantime, let's do Spring Statement, big day, Wednesday, and what's up for grabs, or what's up for chopping, should I put it that way?
It's a huge moment, because it was just meant to be a report of what the Office of Budget Responsibility had concluded. But they are going to conclude things are so bad, Rachel Reeves is going to have to address that in this moment. And the papers, again, are very wary. So the Eye, very varied. The Eye focuses on, actually what it is it's not Labour MPs worried about the triple lock being lifted. It won't be on Wednesday. But they are beginning to wonder whether it should be. Because the finances are so tough, the prospects of spending cuts to some departments are horrific.
Like what? What
the so-called unprotected ones, the Home Office, the Justice Department, prisons, etc. Are in transport, where actually that could be a driver of growth if investment was focused there. These unprotected departments are facing already a nightmarish level of spending constraint. And so some Labour MPs say, well, hold on a second, the disability benefits, which we're cutting, the huge impact of the benefit bill on pensions, or the welfare bill, could be looked at with this triple lock. I remember Salma's a fan of the triple lock. I'm really against it. I just know there's too many rich pensioners who don't need this triple lock.
Yes, but there are plenty more than the ones that who actually really do need the triple lock. And the thing about being on your pension is that the likelihood is that you cannot earn your way into any kind of stable income. It's just not possible for most people at that age. And pensioner poverty is real, which is why the triple lock came in the first place. Now,
but can't you target the poorer pensioners?
There might be a better way of you targeting the poorer pensioners, absolutely, but that's not what this is saying. For some people, the triple lock is a necessity. Now, poor targeting of it is, decades of HMRC and DWP not being able to implement proper digital policies, and that might be where we come back to controversial things like biometric ID cards that was once floated in the Labour government.
Bring those in.
But there is an interesting dynamic to this story. I mean, it feels like everything's been pre-briefed, as quite often happens with autumn statements or spring statements or budgets or whatever, the fiscal event is. And there doesn't seem to be a lot left. So is this perhaps a story that's being run up the flagpole so that they can just signal and litmus test the waters as a potential big announcement that's going to come down the track on Wednesday?
It won't happen on Wednesday. It would be too big. It might happen in the future. It might need to happen. But I don't think it will happen on Wednesday. I don't think she would dare do it.
And also means testing, given what happened with the winter fuel allowance.
Indeed.
I mean, at what point do you start means testing? Hopefully not at that level.
Well, exactly. And the problem with the winter fuel allowance announcement, made in a rush in July unnecessarily, is it means you can't really target pensioners for a second time so soon after that. So I don't think she will do that on Wednesday. But I think it's just interesting that some MPs are saying, look, what are we doing with this triple lock and cutting everything else?
But by the way, the Conservative Party was doing the exact same, having the exact same conversations, and
About the triple lock.
and similar stories were coming up.
I remember.
So we hope that this is not just another thing that the civil services pulled out the top of the drawer that was sort of collecting dust from the last lot that had been in there. And you do have to watch that you're not just trying to make the books balance, you are actually trying to serve the people that elected you.
And The Guardian is also picking up on what we might expect. Rachel Reeves will plough £2 billion into affordable housing in an attempt to sweeten the pill of the spending cuts being announced. So something to put a smile on somebody's face somewhere is the point, isn't it? Amidst rather gloomy growth forecasts and departmental squeeze.
Really gloomy growth forecasts. And Rachel Reeves has elevated the OBR to this sort of godlike body who will descend and tell us how bad things are, and everything has to adapt to that. But it is an interesting counter-briefing that, because there's been a lot of briefings about cuts in civil service, cuts in welfare. We know about the welfare cuts. Here is a spending increase. Now, it's not quite clear where it's coming from and in what form it will take for social housing. But if they have found it $2 billion, I'm not quite sure from where, given all the cuts. But anyway, it would be a good thing. But I think the devil is in the detail with these announcements. But it's an interesting counter spin. Clearly authorised because it's in several papers.
And the difficulty, obviously, if growth is squeezed, your income at the Treasury is going down. But how much of that is laid at the door of the last budget and therefore the Treasury?
I think there's a lot that can be laid at the door of Rachel Reeves's choices, especially around national insurance and the change in income thresholds in terms of the squeeze on growth. I think that this, even sort of a £2 billion pledge, it sounds like a phenomenally big number. And I assume that's just an in-year spending figure. But when I was at the Housing Department, I looked this up. In the autumn budget of 2017, we pledged £15.3 billion in addition to £10 billion for a Help to Buy equity loan scheme. So that's £25 billion that was there over a 5-year period. This doesn't feel like it even is equal to that, and it would be net negative because of inflation. So I think £2 billion sounds like a lot of money, but let's see the detail.
Very interesting.
It's all going to be interesting,
contrast.
and no doubt we'll, this time tomorrow night, we'll be looking, possibly see what lines come out. But anyway, let's move to the Financial Times. Top picture there. It's, a sixth night of protests in Turkey. What does this mean for President Erdogan? What does it mean for the man who's been jailed as well, Istanbul's mayor?
Yeah, so the mayor of Istanbul has been a rival of Erdogan's, and President Erdogan is one of the great strongman leaders of the world that we've seen and has been in power for a long time, largely, as is claimed by his critics, as an autocrat that has stopped dissenting voices, this being an example of another one. I do think it's surprising that only the FT has this on their front page to suggest that it might be some sort of investment story. I'm not sure that people have realised how much of our security goes through Turkey, especially when you consider where ISIS fighters travel from, when you think about what's been happening in the region, not just in relation to Israel and Gaza, but also to Syria, and how important Turkey is to our security.
And shipments through the Black Sea from Ukraine, and Russia's taken a lot of sea coastal area as well. So that's part of the negotiations we've seen in Saudi.
So this story has implications for us, and it's interesting in the way that we view news. I see that there is obviously a very big domestic agenda and that actually sort of, will impact people and the money in their pocket. But this actually, it also has really big downstream consequences for the international order.
Yeah, Steve, your thoughts then? I mean, there's no suggestion people are going to stop demonstrating, is kind of the point, isn't it?
No, and it's part of the sort of international turbulence. No, I think Salma has put it very well. Turkey is absolutely central to virtually every international story at the moment. The relationship with Trump and the United States, the relationship with Putin, and of course, Turkey wants to get into the European Union. It was big. Do you remember that big poster of the whole Brexit thing? Even though they're not going to be allowed in, but you're right. The protest.
A critical NATO member is
critical. Is this day 6 of the protests?
Yes.
So clearly this is something that is building up and not subsiding, and the regime are struggling with it. I think there've been a number of arrests and so on.
Yeah.
Well, journalists have been taken from their homes, was the latest reporting tonight. And
as
the FT puts it, those on the streets fear the move against the mayor marks the most alarming step yet by Erdogan and his party to stymie opposition, extend their more than 2 decades of rule, and ultimately transform Turkey into an autocracy. So that's what we're playing here.
Yeah.
And of course, the Istanbul mayor is secular. And, that is also contrasting President Erdogan and the way he's run.
And also, Erdogan has always been an interesting character for people like Britain to deal with, because he does have open relationships and dialogues with people like President Putin. So Turkey is not a natural ally in that sense, not least because of Erdogan's positioning. Any instability there would require us to have a rethink about our position too.
Yes, and, one of the critical stories we talked about, Ukraine, is where we're going next, because dozens of people have been hit after a hospital in Ukraine was bombed. So is a ceasefire now in doubt? Discussing that next.
The Chancellor is looking for ways to promote growth.
Today, I want to talk about economic growth.
What plans will Rachel Reeves forecast for this spring?
Our growth prospects.
And will they bloom?
To British growth for growth, driving economic growth.
Get the full story first on Sky News.
Growth is the #1 mission.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news.
I am Anna Botting.
It's been quite some day.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
Describe this feeling. It's incredible.
Now to California.
The Democratic mayor of Los Angeles cut the fire department budget.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say today?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
I've never seen anything like this.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you, the president, is banned. How is this a fair election?
Historic day here today.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere, waiting to see what the president might do next.
I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky security and defence editor. I've covered Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent. Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Steve Richards and Salma Shah. Welcome back to both of you. Salma, let's go to the Metro, shall we? And it's also, interestingly, I have to say, the lead for the Daily Express. Putin's brutal peace offering as talks resume in Saudi Arabia between the US and Russia. This is what Ukraine suffered, you know, a terrible targeting of Sumy with dozens, scores injured.
Yeah, and this is a stage in the negotiations where we know that there is pressure from a lot of sides who are influencing these discussions to bring a peace settlement out. But it's sort of harrowing because this is showing us that the Russian side, at the very least, is not negotiating with good faith. Because you would think that actually targeting a hospital in particular would be an act that they would retreat from because they are trying to show goodwill in order to come to a settlement. But this is kind of the kind of positioning that suggests that there is not good faith in these negotiations.
Yeah, and Daily Express as well. Let's have a look at that. You know, this is their reminder to the Trump administration. Mr. Trump, wake up. Ukrainians are the victims here, you know, of the great debate of, you know, who started this conflict.
Yeah, and this was always going to be the sort of missing element to it all. You know, early on there was a focus of Trump's terrible relationship with Ukraine, but actually the missing element was always, you say, oh, Putin's up for a deal, you know, he's up for a deal. And was he? And is he? And what form? And when he used to say, you know, either the US, I hold the cards, or Ukraine certainly don't hold any cards. Well, Putin has got a few cards, and he obviously sees one of them, continuing to bomb, you know, Ukraine, while these negotiations continue. So it's the missing element to all of this is what would Putin accept in any negotiation? Now, maybe, we were saying earlier, it's a big week, this. Maybe we're about to find out, but it's not at all clear.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at Heathrow, shall we? You know, a few lines coming out today. We certainly saw the Transport Secretary briefing the House of Commons earlier. But here suggesting that the Prime Minister has refused to support the boss of Heathrow amidst questions about whether or not the whole of the airport had to shut down, which is a sort of becoming an interesting debate.
Yeah, so the reason why I think this story is interesting, because it's, again, applying that pressure and applying a set of rules that sort of apply in politics but don't necessarily apply in business. So the Chief Executive of Heathrow has come under a lot of pressure around his actions. I happen to think that what he suggested was reasonable. If through other investigation, it's found that there wasn't correct risk mitigation around some of this, then I think, you know, we will have to see senior executives considering their positions. But I think it's really unfair, before any of that has come about and any understanding, to try and apply pressure to somebody who's clearly trying to work through a crisis situation. And also for the Prime Minister not to try and support somebody who otherwise has been running critical national infrastructure for a long time. And Heathrow is private. This doesn't really have anything to do with the Prime Minister unless there was a huge security breach. And, you know, I understand, you know, the questions around the leadership and the National Grid, but I do think it's unfair to pile this pressure on into a business leader.
I agree with nearly all of that, except for the last bit. I mean, I've heard it. Yeah. I mean, Starmer, like the rest of us, doesn't know the answer to the questions of whether it could have stayed open, and therefore I don't think he can completely clear the situation now. But that doesn't necessarily condemn him. We just need to know more.
Steve, Salma, thank you. See you for more at 11. Let's look at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days look fairly calm and dry, some sunshine, but it will be cloudy at times. Southern England will have a mostly fine if chilly start tomorrow. Patchy frost, fog, central parts look rather murky and damp. Northern Scotland can expect sunny spells and a few coastal showers. Cloud and patchy light rain will spread across much of the south during the morning.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.